Northern Corridor Community Board meeting, and the usual protocols are in place. The meeting will be recorded and available on the YouTube channel at a later date. So please use language that's appropriate for such circumstances. And we have a full agenda as usual. I must apologise, I wasn't able to prune it as much as maybe I would have liked, but there's plenty of stuff that I know you will want to get your teeth into. So if we can commence, we can start with asking for any apologies for tonight's meeting. Are there any apologies?
Yes, Chair, I have 4 apologies so far. We have an apology from Evelyn Ryan, Gabby Mitas, although Martin Webb is here from NHS Lanarkshire, Anne Innes and Pauline McCall from Voice of Experience Forum. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Anybody else aware of any apologies? Okay. Minutes of the previous meeting, these were circulated, and hopefully you've all had the opportunity to review those. If there's anything that is going to arise that's not already on the agenda, we can bring that up in a few moments. For those of you that were present, would anyone be able to propose them as a record of that meeting? I can't see any volunteers.
Happy to propose Brandon Anne-Marie Kirkland.
Thank you, Anne-Marie. A seconder? Surely somebody else must remember that meeting. Don't be shy.
I'm happy to second it, Brandon.
Thank you, Andrew. From that meeting, there are a set of action points attached, and those action points hopefully will be being addressed. However, let's have a quick look at what they were. So, a list of groups that are within the Northern Corridor area. I believe you should now have a list that's been circulated. What I would like to know is obviously the completeness of that list. If there are groups that are missed from that list, please could you let the community partnership team know so that that list can be updated and made more complete. The wider planning and infrastructure issues, we have a presentation this evening which should address that requirement. Is Isabel available? Did the police make contact with yourselves? Isabel Kelly?
Hello?
Hello. Did the police make contact with you as agreed at the last meeting?
Yes, they did. Sorry about that, Brandon. Yes, they did.
Okay. Was that successful?
Yes, I have the contact details should I need them, and they've offered coming to events, etc. So if we're having a group event, they said that they'll turn up in presence and speak to kids and generally be there. So what more can you ask? The
request for a presentation from the Education Department has been subject to some communications. They have at this point in time not made themselves available. I don't know whether Alice would like to make any comments as correspondence took place with yourself.
Thank you, Brandon. I made the request for this presentation from Education and Families regarding the MELM head teacher pilot proposal, which has proven extremely contentious issue. I asked for the presentation at the last community board meeting in February, and it hadn't been actioned when the first sheet came round regarding that, and I asked again why this hadn't been actioned, and the response from Education and Families I found both puzzling and disappointing. My request, as I said, was made in February, and Education and Families have reported that they are not available to deliver this presentation because they are still assessing the large amount of feedback received from the consultation process that was undertaken in April. My request was not about the results regarding the consultation process. I appreciate that the community will be interested in the feedback from the consultation process, but this was not what I asked, and indeed what I could not have asked in February. I asked again that Education and Families reconsider their first negative response and indicated that the Northern Corridor Community Board is described as a place for community concerns to be raised and discussed, and where representatives from the local community groups and community planning partners are involved in the meetings, looking at and debating issues that affect the local community. Now, this formed the basis of my request. This was then sent back to Education and Families with a request that I be contacted directly, and Education and Families have not contacted me directly. I have to say that this item was discussed at the Northern Corridor Community Forum, and I deem it unacceptable that Education and Families will not involve themselves or itself in a discussion at the Northern Corridor Community Board. So I wish this minuted, please, Brandon, that there is extreme disappointment and that this response is unacceptable.
Andrew, you have your hand up.
Yeah, thanks, Brandon. Yeah, I can maybe just give a wee bit of an update, Alice. Further to the community forum, I did speak with Education and Families just about the obviously the concern that was getting raised about me at the group. I now have word that over the next week to 2 weeks, there will be an announcement from Education and Families on that very subject, and further details will be provided at that time. So definitely information will be coming forward in the next week to 2 weeks.
Does that mean they will actually do a presentation to the board, Andrew?
I think it's depending on what the announcement will be. Obviously, the board will then determine whether there's a need for a presentation. So I think we'll just wait and see what the outcome from that is.
Carol, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, thanks, Brandon. The problem is that it doesn't really matter what happens in the next 1 to 2 weeks. The presentation was supposed to explain to us exactly what they were looking to do, explain to us what the situation would detail. It wasn't anything at all to do with the consultation or anything like that. It was to give more information as to what the whole process of MELM was, what the council were looking to do. that's the issue. So the next 1 to 2 weeks doesn't really make any difference. And what they're doing is they've totally blanked us, and they're now saying that they're coming out with with more information or making a decision within the next 1 to 2 weeks. That's far too late, because they've not given the public, in this case, the extra information that they requested to explain the situation before they could make a choice.
Thank you, Carol. Is it possible, Andrew, that we could go back to education and ask if they could put a presentation together for the members of the board so that we can fully understand what MELM is actually about?
I'll certainly do that, Brandon, but it's okay with yourself. If I can wait to the announcement from Education and Families, first of all, and then we can take it from there to vote for the action appropriate for the board, and I can contact yourself after that one, Brandon, if that's okay.
Okay, we can see that. Colin McIntyre.
Thank you, Brandon. I know we've been at your kind of Northern Causa meeting a few times with Alice and Carol and stuff like that, and it's quite kind of apt to this has been the whole, what Alice has said is the fundamental that nobody's talked to us. MELM is about cost, that is about it. End of. Cost. That's what we've been told for the education and families. This is about a cost-driven decision, which is a shambles.
Okay, Carol.
I don't see, all due respect, Andrew, I don't see why you want to wait for the announcement to come out. What difference does that make to the fact that we asked for a presentation from the department to explain more as to what they were looking to do, so that we could decide which way to answer the consultation? I mean, it's now too late. So really, the consultation is useless, because the education department did not give the information to the communities in order to answer the consultation. So there's no point in giving a consultation, and there's no point in doing it now, unless you're going to redo the consultation period after they've done the presentation. And they most certainly should not be given a result or making an announcement unless it's not to do it within the next 1 to 2 weeks, because they have not consulted the public properly, and they have not explained properly what they wanted to do. So the whole thing, to be quite honest with you, is an absolute farce.
Isabel Kelly.
I don't want to shoot the messenger, Andrew. You've came back with a message. Thank you for that, because you've obviously tried to engage with the education department. I think this is more to do with how we are being treated in terms of equality and in terms of the board. This is a decision made by council officers who have decided, no matter what the subject is, if they decide it's contentious, if they decide that they don't want to turn up, then they can make that decision and not turn up, and it makes a mockery of the community board. So whether it be MEL or whether it be another subject, we should not have a situation where the community board, when we only meet 4 times a year and those minutes are prepared and people are asked to attend and they're given the right information and what to prepare for, and they take a decision not to turn up. I think, and the second thing is, if that is the council's attempt at a consultation, 5, forgive the French, crappy questions that amounted to taking the temperature of the community or seeking consultation from council officers, that is an absolute disgrace. That was not a consultation. So that would be my comment to that.
Could we have Andrew and then finally Alice, and then we'll move on?
I'm listening. Sorry, I don't think my sound's too great. People are saying so. Hopefully that's a bit better now. But what I suggest, Isabel, I totally understand and agree with what you've said there. So I think you know the seriousness of this, obviously that's been expressed here, probably deserves a meeting separate from the community board, because I can see the length of today's agenda. So you know, certainly what I will do is I'll go back and, well, like I say, I'd like to wait until the outcome of what they're actually, because they are considering the consultation responses. Once we get that, if there's a need, I'm quite happy to facilitate a further meeting which will just involve this one subject, one item agenda only.
And finally, Alice.
Thank you, Brandon. I will reiterate one more time. The stance and the position being adopted by Education and Families is totally and completely unacceptable. Their treatment of the community across the Northern Corridor, the treatment of individual requests such as mine, as a bona fide resident across in Steps, which has a feeder school to Christon, where this model is being suggested, is again unacceptable. It also shows disrespect to this board. We are not sitting here with a begging bowl asking for council officers to come along. And I really want this noted. This cannot continue in this fashion. Thank you, Brandon.
Thank you. I think we need to move on because obviously we do have a lot to cover. The next point in the action points was about GP practices and transport issues to NHS treatment rooms. There was a document circulated just immediately prior to this meeting as a response from NHS Lanarkshire, but they also are participating in the planning presentation that we're going to hear shortly, so hopefully they will address that further. We had a C-L&D plan put forward to us. This was in relation to community learning and development. Again, you've had a chance to review that. That was relevant to young people within the community. My only comment is it gave some numbers in it, and I was surprised at how few young people were being engaged in activities. Body from CLD present tonight? No young people present either? Okay, well maybe we need to get more engagement from that team, because children and young people is one of our LOIP priorities.
Brandon, there was a hand up from Dean Collins there.
My problem is, of course, if I'm looking at my minutes and my notes, I don't see any hands. Who had their hand up?
Dean Collins? Or Anna Porteous? They're all coming up with their hands up.
Peter McNally, you've got your hand up.
Thanks, Chair. I think Dean and his colleague are from the Northern Corridor Youth Voice Group, I believe, and are also local MSYPs. And yeah, it might be useful to get a quick update from them about some of the activities they're taking part in. And just to add, I know I've had a chat with Caroline Simpson, our CLD youth worker who supports the young people, and they've expressed an interest in being involved in the children and young people subgroup as well, and some of the work in Moodiesburn. So, Dean, would you be happy to come on and just give us a brief update, please?
Yeah, so I'm the MSYP for Coatbridge and Christon. I've not really participated in the Northern Corridor Youth Voice Group as much. I've been trying to get involved with it, but it's just like the location of it and that just now for me. But yeah, that's about it.
Thank you, Dean. And there was another hand up. R. Thompson.
Yeah, yeah, Robin Thompson. This is the first time I've been in contact with the operation here. I'm an instructor with a youth group, which is the Sea Cadet group in Airdrie, covering North Lanarkshire. We participate in sailing and canoeing and things up the loch up there. But I just wanted to make myself known and us known that I feel that we have not really had the kids participating a lot within the Lanarkshire, North Lanarkshire area, you know, within the community. We only get participation in likes of the Remembrance Day and things like that. But I thought for our public image that we should be, the kids should be more involved in the community.
Thank you for that. I'm certainly well aware of your organisation. I obviously don't know of your activities in North Lanarkshire, but yes, certainly if you could raise your profile in the area, it would be very useful, because I'm sure there would be some young people that would join you. Anna Porteous.
I'm the same as Dean. I'm one of the MSYPs for Coatbridge and Christon, along with him, and I'm in the Coatbridge Youth Voice group.
Okay, thank you. Again, I think we should pursue this further, maybe at another meeting. Next item was the LDP Gart Kosh, talking about funding. Isabel, did you receive some information from the team relating to that?
The only information that I received was regarding the Resilience Fund for COVID, which I'd got through Andrew, and we are putting together an application on that. As far as the development projects are concerned, no, other than match funding, Gatcosh wouldn't get anything under that, because there's no land in Gatcosh that the council own that could be developed or a project could be created. So unless we have match funding, the council would maybe take a view then to match fund it. But unless your project is associated with North Lanarkshire's land, if you like, or access or pathways, then they don't have a mechanism to be able to engage with you as a development project.
Yes, I can certainly say our experience in Auchenlock is similar. No doubt we'll pick up on LDP projects later on. The next point was the LDP project for Mollinsburn. I don't know if Carol, do you have anything to report back on that?
I've not heard, not had any update on it at all.
Right, okay. Well, hopefully we'll pick up on that later. And the final action point related to the LOIPs, which are coming up later on in the meeting anyway. We have a presentation from planning. It related to a request for them to come along and explain or give us some insight into planning and how it works and its impact with the Northern Corridor. and we have a number of people who have put together a presentation and will present that to us. I think we'll start with, let me find my notes again. Reminds me of people's names. Gordon Lang, I believe you're presenting part of this.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Can you hear me okay, everybody?
Yes, I can hear you.
Good. That's just the new laptop last week, and sometimes the audio doesn't work too well. My name's Gordon Lang. I'm a planning manager, strategy and policy, and I've got 3 colleagues from other service departments across the council who are involved in forward planning in one way or another. It's Charles McCabe, forward planning and specification manager, Gary Wood, who's a transportation manager, and Raymond Taylor, health and social work manager. If you could go on to the next slide, please, Christine, if that works. But there we are there. We were asked 4 questions in our brief. I'll be speaking to a question on how are the number of developments and housing unit types arrived at. Charles will be speaking to the question, what plan is in place to provide for increased numbers of students for the schools in the area? Gary will be speaking to the question, what plan is there in place to promote active travel and reduce motor vehicle journeys in the area from the increased housing developments? And Raymond will be speaking to the question, what plan is in place to provide for the increased need for access to primary health care and social care in the area? Next slide, please, Christine. Many of you I recognise from previous meetings, so apologies if you've heard some of this before. Effectively, how are the number of developments and housing unit types arrived at? There are 2 primary ways that housing development, land for housing development are identified. These are through development planning, which is my primary role within the council, and planning applications, which is the other side of the department I work in. Within development planning, it's a long process. The current development plan started 9 years ago, and we're just moving towards, hopefully, adoption soon. It's with the government now. And in development planning, the main factors looking at housing development are a housing land requirement, and that's the amount of land that's required to be allocated to meet an identified target. Now, the target is the number of houses that are required in a specific area. The requirement includes an extra amount over that to allow flexibility within the market. So we're required to, in many people's view, over-allocate land. And in the case of the area we sit within, that's a 15% generosity, it's called. We also have an affordable housing policy, and this is the only real area of policy where we can influence the actual types of houses. For private developments, it's very much market-led and market-driven, and the house builders assess their own and the market needs or desires and provide housing towards that. As part of the development planning process, we also consult with other services and partners from the beginning of the process through to the proposed plan stage, and then after a plan's adopted, we would advise departments and services through an action programme of what requires to happen in relation to bringing sites forward, what additional requirements may be in place, whether that's sewerage, roads, education, or health, or social care, or play, but primarily around about roads, education and infrastructure requirements. Proposed sites are identified in a plan to meet any requirement, and that plan is subject to wide public consultation and then an examination by reporters appointed by the Scottish Government. As I said, the other way that housing sites can come through, and that's through planning applications. The hope and the intention of the plan-led system we operate within is that those will be on sites identified in the local development plan, because they've already been consulted upon and they've already been agreed by reporters. But applications can come in sites that haven't been identified in the plan, and there's really nothing we can do to stop that. And we then have to go through a process of assessing whether that site is acceptable in terms of the development plan, not only in terms of the suitability of the site, but in terms of whether we actually need additional housing land. And to cut a long story short, and I'll come to this later, we haven't identified any need for additional housing land in the Northern Corridor area. Next slide, please. The current system has two levels of plan. There's the strategic development plan, and that uses a government tool called the Housing Need and Demand Assessment. And it's designed to give a long-term estimate of what future housing need might be. This tool was developed by the Government Centre for Housing Market Analysis, and we have to use that at a regional level to produce these long-term estimates. They use household projections for the National Records of Scotland, so that's based on population growth and distribution. And it also looks at a range of economic and demographic assumptions about future performance of the housing market through analysing market conditions. It also looks at household formations, household composition, so how many young people are in a house and maybe looking for housing. It looks at net migration, rental affordability, unemployment and employment levels, income, house prices, mortgage rates, important factors like homeless backlog need, and estimates of households which are deemed to be concealed or overcrowded, and that's where it may be a family who have all grown up in the house and the younger members of the family can't afford to move or can't get access to housing, and that would be looked at. The outputs of this exercise arrive at a number of houses or households that are required, and therefore houses needed across the Glasgow and Clyde Valley area. This process must be checked by the Centre for Housing Market Analysis, and it has to be credited as robust and credible for any development plan to be able to be considered further. Final approval of the housing supply target and the subsequent housing land requirements by the government in Edinburgh at a regional level are then derived at a local authority level for local development plans, and that's what we at North Lanarkshire do, although we have a hand in working regionally as well as part of the consortium of 8 authorities in Glasgow and the Clyde Valley. Local development plan takes the figures from the strategic development plan and splits them up by housing submarket area. These are self-contained areas generally recognised, and in North Lanarkshire there are 3. There's the Cumbernauld housing submarket area, the Airdrie Coatbridge housing submarket area, and the Motherwell and Mishaw housing submarket area, roughly north, central and south. Once we've identified the requirement, we do carry out a call for sites to identify if there's any land with potential to meet that requirement across North Lanarkshire. It's not just limited to the areas of need, also we don't generally close it off. Importantly, if sites have got no numbers attached out of this, we allocate a 25 unit per hectare average development level, and that allows us to look at whether new sites are required, but also how much sites can contribute. It's important to emphasise now that that's the current system, the past system. Scottish Government's proposing a brand new system for development planning. You may or you may not have been involved in the consultation that went from December to March on this. There were well over 700 individuals and bodies who responded to the various consultations. And through this, the government's actually going to set what's called the minimum all tenure housing land requirement, and that's a 10-year figure. And for North Lanarkshire Council, that's substantially lower than the current figure that we're operating to. We're currently operating to a figure of about 14,000 units. And the current proposal from government is 7,350 units over 10 years as being the minimum number required. I think I should point out that the housing industry is not at all happy with that low figure, and among many others have objected to that figure being in the government planning framework. Local development plans will then have to, in a new departure, identify a pipeline of sites, have an affordable housing policy again, which has control over types, but this time the government is setting the minimum level of affordable housing. 25%, at the moment it's 20%, or it will be 20% for Cumbernauld housing submarket area, but the government set a new minimum of 25% where affordable housing is deemed to be required. And as part of the development of the plan, for the first time, the government has stipulated that there's a requirement for a report on education needs and a report on health needs across the authority, the implications of development on those needs, and how through the local development plan the council and its partners intend to meet those needs as part of the plan process. So that's a couple of items which I think are of interest in relation to the presentation tonight and the questions you've been asking, but there are a whole number of other requirements that are being placed on local authorities at the moment. I'll point out, because I'm duty bound to point out, their unfunded duties. Many people have counted anything between 50 and 150 new reports or duties that have been added. Next local development plan that we prepare will be prepared in accordance with these new processes when they are in place, which we expect to be later this year following the reissuing of amended National Planning Framework and Development Plan regulations. My next and final slide, please. Thank you. A brief history for the Northern Corridor area. Many of you again will be familiar with this. I haven't gone all the way back, but in 2006, the structure plan, which is the regional plan, identified there was a requirement for community growth areas across the whole of Glasgow in the west. And it identified 3 areas in North Lanarkshire and required that we put those areas into our local development plan, our local plan at the time. And one of those was Gartcosh Glenboig, the other was South Cumbernauld, and there was a further one in Wishaw. The 2012 local plan confirmed these areas following examination, and the reporters, having been convinced that there was a shortage of land, added further sites across the Cumbernauld housing submarket area to meet what they considered to be a requirement. The 2022 local development plan, which as I say is with the government just now, identified no requirement for additional housing across Cumbernauld housing submarket area, and by dint of that, the Northern Corridor. Through the call for sites which we undertook, about 475 hectares of land was put to North Lanarkshire Council as having potential. It was brought forward by owners or developers or agents, and that's the potential of just under 12,000 units. But we already indicated that we didn't feel a requirement, and that was agreed with by communities through consultation many years ago, but through consultation. We do have to carry out a settlement boundary review, and as part of that, 4 sites, and 3 of which were sites that were left over from the 2012 plan by the reporters, putting in new sites and leaving sites technically in the green belt but surrounded by housing land, and we had to resolve that issue. So some sites were added through that, and that amounted to a total of 227 units. This approach was endorsed at the examination, report of examination, which was issued last year, and we're now seeking to adopt this plan. That said, the findings in that plan and the adoption can be subjected to a legal challenge once the government has agreed that we can take it forward. I should also point out that some of the sites submitted at call for sites, although we elected not to put them in through the development plan process, are now in the plan because planning permission was granted on them at appeal or by the council. In total, there's currently 38 sites identified across the Northern Corridor out of 366 sites across North Lanarkshire, which is just under 4,000 units of capacity in the Northern Corridor, and there's over 22,000 units of capacity identified across North Lanarkshire, and that's the latest agreed figures. I'm now going to hand over to Charles. Apologise if that took too long and was rather obscure, but unfortunately that's a rather technical way we have to deal with these matters. So I'll now hand over to Charles, who'll probably be able to point you to meaningful intervention on the ground in relation to schools.
Thank you, Gordon. Isabel Kelly has her hand up. Could she ask a quick question?
We were going to take questions at the end, but I'm happy to take a question now.
Take questions regarding planning and then move on, because I think by the time we get to the end of it, we might not have time to go through it, and we might not remember quite a lot of statistics that have been put in front of us. So if that's okay with everyone, I just wanted to make that point.
Have you got a quick question, Isabel?
Oh, I never have a quick question when it comes to planning, but I think Alice had her hand up before me, so I'll let her go first.
This is a quick question, Isabel. According to the timetable for the adoption of the proposed modified local development plan, the final date is today, the 25th of May. Is there any update, Gordon, on that?
Yes, we received a letter yesterday morning from the government. We've not been able to update our website yet. We received a letter from the government yesterday morning extending that period for another 28 days.
And what's that date then, Gordon?
Oh, now, if you bear with me, I'll open the email. That's the one thing that I don't actually have open tonight, so I apologise for that. We'll go through yesterday's emails. Apologies, you can never find something when you're looking for it. 22nd of June.
And are the reasons for this extension given by the Scottish Government?
No, they haven't given reasons.
So that's legitimate that they do not have to provide reasons for an extension of another 28 days?
It's within their powers to do that. We have asked, and there's been no indication yet for the reasons.
Thank you.
It's what I will point out, it's not uncommon. I've been checking with other colleagues across other local authorities, and it's not uncommon for these extensions to be granted. I can't speak on the government's behalf, but they are small teams and they're working in the consultations that I was mentioning earlier.
Thank you.
Thank you, Gordon. Isabel, your quick question now. No? You're happy? Should we move on to Charles then?
Sorry, I was on mute. I think Gordon planning kind of missed the point of the presentation. We asked for a face-to-face meeting was the first thing. We asked for planning to come to the board, and we asked for planning to explain why services and the effect of house building in the Northern Corridor. I have looked at figures. I must add them up wrong, and probably I would, and that I'm not a planning expert. But if I take information on the housing land requirement from Clyde Plan, it's on the private housing, it's 16,420, and it's got an all-tender supply target of 1820, and that is with a 15% generosity built in. And the modified plan is actually 30% over the 15% generosity that's built in. So in terms of the amount of housing land supply that has been given over, we're actually looking at the 30% that is extra over the 15% that is required through Clyde Plan. So that's maybe something that we would maybe like to discuss with you. No point in getting into the argument about it now. And I am the first to say I'm not a planning expert. What I've done is looked at what Clyde Plan is proposed. I've counted up all the sites within the modified plan, and it's just a simple arithmetic. And we have also looked at, if you look at, we are 7 villages, small villages, and we are looking at it being B roads and 1 or 2 major A roads that connect us, apart from any amenities. And the Northern Corridor is taking 25% of all development across North Lanarkshire. And we can only say that, again, when we look at it from an equalities point of view, if we look at it from Motherwell, and we look at what Motherwell has been given, and we are not saying take it off of Motherwell, what we're saying is we should have the same. We have had no amenities, we have had our schools wrecked, we have had our roads wrecked, and quite frankly, the Northern Corridor is a very miserable place to live. through housing development. And not that housing development is bad. Nobody is disagreeing that new houses need to be built. The manner in which the master plan has been executed, both in Glenboig and Gartcosh, is appalling. You could not write the issues that have been caused by the lack of planning, the lack of skills, the lack of staff in the planning department, and the lack of being able to negotiate with developers and take them on and get the deal. This community growth area was put forward through consultation. You had to fell down a forest to create the documentation and the framework document and the 24 checklists that are supposed to be applied when people or developers make application. And none of it is applied. And we have a site round that loch that looks like we had a 7 lochs master plan, and the housing was to fit into the 7 lochs plan, not 7 lochs into the housing. And we are going to end up with over 1,800 houses built round a loch that is over 11,500 years old and has a sink. We have no park, we have no community centre, nothing. And the Northern Corridor is the same. They are right across the Northern Corridor. They are losing asset. We're not getting any assets. And other communities are losing assets because the actual house building is driving that, where other things have to be sacrificed because of the planners. Now, it'll need to stop. So much so, we have taken it to the Scottish Office. We are asking for an independent inquiry into the Northern Corridor in terms of planning and in terms of education and in terms of health. Because what has been achieved here is terrible, and we don't want to listen to sins of the father in previous history. We would like the people who are in post now to sort the problem and engage. And as far as Gartcosh is concerned, when we get to schools, the problem can be solved very, very quickly. Very quickly indeed. The community's already solved the problem. The point is, no officer inside the council will sit down and engage with communities. So we can argue along with the numbers that you've put forward, but we are saying to you, 7 villages taking 25% of everything that is going on in North Lanarkshire, and no amenities to show for it, no roads to show for it, and loss of community amenities. It is unacceptable. And that was the type of presentation we wanted with planning, not statistics. So it's slightly disappointing. But we'll be here all night if I'm left to speak, so I'll cut off now.
Thank you, Isabel. Charles McCabe?
Yes, Chair, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Could you move to the next slide, please? Thanks. So I'm not going to read out what's on the slide. It should be in your pack. So you can see this is what we've outlined as what plan is in place to provide for the increased number of students. We've broken it down by school. I do apologise, Chair. I realise we've missed Auchinloch off the list. And I'm sure you'd be quite right to pick me up in that.
I won't mention Auchinloch. I refer to Auchinloch as Brigadoon.
Right. So Auchinloch's essentially in the same sort of plan as St Joseph's, Glen Manor and St Michael's. So you'll be aware that the council has a commitment to replace all pre-1996 schools, and Auchinloch being a pre-1996 school is the same as Glen Manor, St Michael's and St Joseph's. So at the moment they're in the list, but there is there's no actual date for when they'll come forward. The other ones were outlining what the proposal is. I'm not going to go over the statistics because Isabel says that's not what you're looking for, but I suppose just to reiterate that, and so I don't know if it's given you assurance or not, but we do engage fully with planning right before LDP stage. So before the local development plan, they do ask what where we would like, as education authority, where we would like to see capacity increased. So the balance in any given school is what they would refer to as the sort of Goldilocks. We don't want schools too full, we don't want them too empty, we just want them just right. So there are some areas in North Lanarkshire where we would want house building to try and create more demand where there are excess capacity, but in the Northern Corridor, as we're all aware, there is increased demand and not enough capacity. So this kind of slide outlines how we look to bring that forward. We are aware that there are challenges in some areas. I know Isabel will bring up and has already brought up Gartcosh. We are where we are with Gartcosh. The council doesn't own any land, and we are actively looking at securing a deal down there. We can't go into it for commercial reasons, but we are progressing that, and we are looking, as it says on the slide, we've got different scenarios and different solutions for each of the schools within the Northern Corridor area. So I'll leave it at that. I'm happy to take any questions. As I say, it kind of outlines in the slide, I think, hopefully what the plan is and what answers the question that was raised by the board.
Thank you, Charles. You mentioned Auchenlock. I'm aware of parents in Auchenlock that can't get their children into the local primary school, and they find that very disappointing. You know, it really is something that affects the people that live in the area. Anybody else got any questions for Charles?
Chair, I've raised my hand. Would it be possible to ask a question?
It is. It's unfortunate I can't see you. So, yes, Greg.
Thanks very much, Chair. Basically, what I'd like to ask Charles is the statutory consultation for the new Gartcosh Primary School was conducted, I think it was over 4 years ago. It's already been through committee twice or 3 times with approval for expenditure, and yet we're still in a position where we've no identified site. Under normal practice, Charles, perhaps you could answer a question for me. How long after a statutory consultation is concluded would we look to have a site identified? And obviously in Gartcosh's case, I'm aware of the commercial sensitivity that surrounds the identified site, but is there any alternatives currently being looked at present? Because, as I said, 4 or 5 years we're going into now, there's quite a significant amount of time for residents of Gartcosh to wait for a primary school and to ensure their child's attainment and education is being met by the authority. So I'd be most obliged if you can give me an answer.
Yes, so on the sort of timescale from statutory consultation, we would generally carry out the statutory consultation when funding's been approved. So that was the case in Gartcosh, but we generally have the site identified when, so we know it's generally a council-owned site where we would build schools because there's no risk involved in that. We own the site, we therefore control the timescales, etc. But we don't have that luxury down in Gartcosh. So we're trying to balance the. We have to consult with parents before we take something forward, but there's always a risk that we then, if we don't own the land, that we can't then deliver what we've then consulted on, and that's exactly what's happening down in Gartcosh. So we're now in the stage where we're having to approach it from the other angle, where we're now looking to secure some land, and if we secure that land, we'll be securing the land at risk, because if the land we secure is not in the same location as where the statutory education consultation was taking place, then we will have to go back out to that statutory education consultation, and there is a possibility that would be denied. So part of our risk appraisal has to look at what the scenario would be should it be the case that we cannot get it through a statutory education consultation, and we have to look at how we would mitigate that risk to the council. Even if it is on the bit of land that we've already consulted on, there is a question around how long after a statutory education consultation can you wait before you then go in, and so there'll be other stuff that's going on in the area that might not have been part of the consultation. So if it is in that bit of land, we would need to review that and see whether, and speak to Education Scotland and see whether the existing statutory education consultation remained, or whether we would need to go back out and refresh that consultation because of the time that's elapsed. So it's a very complicated process, and it's it's predominantly because we don't control the land, so therefore we're not in control of the solution. We cannot deliver a school on a bit of land we don't have. So it's unique. It's the first time it's happened where we've had a statutory education consultation and not been able to take it forward straight away.
Chair, I know that Alice has got her hand up, but since we're on Gartcosh, could I speak? It's Isabel here.
Okay, Isabel.
Sorry, Alice, I'll be 2 minutes.
There are other hands up as well.
Charles, this is all a piece of nonsense. The land, we were given a consultation on a single site. Parents, the community raised their objection to that site. The things that we quoted have came to fruition. The council wouldn't listen. The amount of hectares on the Persimmon site was put forward, and councillors and officers just thought the magnitude of that site, we're putting everything on there and you can like it or lump it. We didn't like it. We knew what the problems were, and the site has so many constraints on it. It has caused major issue. We met with Persimmon. They told us, you don't have money for a site, they will charge you full commercial rent. For 18 months, we have told Greg Lennon and we have told council officers the community has a site for a community hub and a site for the school in Ward 6. It is not in the modified plan. It would give you extreme advantage in terms of cost because you won't be paying developers prices. They are willing to sell you the land. They are willing to give the land to the community for the community hub. And you have ignored every single request that has been made for you to engage and look at that land.
I would disagree with that last statement. I think I remember sending yourself an email on that particular bit of land and why at an early stage we did not deem it to be a suitable bit of land to be taken forward because of access.
It sits on Johnston Road. It sits next to at least 600 or 700 of the houses that are built. You have just passed planning permission for a road. By the way, we had a presentation there that said we have not allocated any more land, and this road is going through the only green space that was actually put forward in Gartcosh to build another 75 houses and a road, and that was to be a no-build site. But the road has been passed to go through that gives you the access, and planning knew that that application was there. So therefore you knew that you had access to the land. No one is speaking to each other. No one is talking to each other. And you cannot buy the land that you're looking to negotiate and buy when there is land sitting there and you are using public money that will be 2 or 3 times more than the value of the land that you're looking at. And it is not going in Ward 5 because the latest rumour is it's going in Mount Ellen, which is not Ward 6 and will not give this village its school. So you can get that right out your head now. So I think it's about time, Greg, you're on here, you get a meeting organised about this school with this community so that we can put our point of view forward. Because this is a piece of nonsense. There is someone there willing to give land, willing to give the community land when the master plan for this area, you have not put in one facility. And we have been totally ignored.
Okay, can we give some other people an opportunity to speak? Alice, quickly.
First of all, I fully support Isabel's last statement. We require a face-to-face meeting with education, with yourself, Charles, as Education Forward Planner, as you were on the 12th of February 2019, and I'm going to come back to that. Now, I believe on this Zoom we have Councillor Cairns, Councillor Williams, and again, we are asking that you join Councillor Lennon and that we have an urgent meeting about the school situation across the Northern Corridor. Now, Mr. McCabe, and for those of you who have been following this story for years, this presentation here smacks quite clearly of the approach that you adopted on the 12th of February 2019, when you were invited along to the Northern Corridor Local Area Partnership, the LAP, and you were asked to give specific details regarding the complex issues surrounding each school across the Northern Corridor. I was there representing STEPS. Now, you did then what you are doing now. This replicates or duplicates the approach that you adopted, where you skimmed and you generalised across this, and this is what you were presenting, and you're not going to read it out to us because, well, we presume you can read it yourself. This is totally unsatisfactory. Now, I am I'm demanding on behalf of the Northern Corridor Community Forum that an urgent meeting is arranged to discuss steps in Cardown, to discuss Christon and Muirhead, to discuss Gartcosh, to discuss Moodiesburn, and to discuss Auchinloch primary schools. Now, I'm also going to move on to, we had a presentation previously from planning, and that there should be consultations and some sort of joined up strategy regarding education. Now, this has to be taken seriously. The futures of our young people depend on a quality education, the delivery of an education suitable for 2022. And I'm going to refer here to the North Lanarkshire Council LDP, page 52, section 5. And I'm making this reference in terms of the way education has been dealt with in STEPS. This policy is about housing and community facilities. This policy is HCF1. This policy is about protecting residential amenity and community facilities. And this policy states, and I will summarise it in a sentence, HCF1 is about protecting amenities and community facilities. The local plan not only needs to provide housing development, but the local development plan should protect valued community facilities, and it should also promote new communities facilities that communities need. Now, you all well know, and everyone on this meeting knows, of the way education was conducted here in STEPS, where the community facilities were requisitioned for education without any consultation with this community. Now, as Isabel said, we could write a book on this. However, I am asking, demanding that an urgent face-to-face meeting is made with the Northern Corridor Community Forum to hear directly, clearly, the issues that are being experienced across all these primary schools in the Northern Corridor. Thanks, Brandon.
Thank you, Alice. Carol.
Thank you, Brandon. I'd just like to know that if yourself and the other presenters that have done already and are going to present, work together on the forward planning of the developments and with education and with health, etc. Why was so much, the issues with the schools and the capacity of schools and the schools being at capacity or near capacity, or whether a school has the possibility of being able to expand within the grounds that they have. You should know all of that already. That is what forward planning is. So why was so much housing development being allowed if you already knew from an education point of view that your schools were not capable of taking the capacity that these developments were going to provide? Or did you not do any forward planning?
No, we certainly do forward plan. We look at the housing land audits and we look at the local development plans. We're aware of what anticipated houses is, and that's what we model against. But as Gordon touched on, there are different ways that housing can come into the mix. It's not necessarily through housing allocation, it's through either approvals from other parts, so either Scottish Government, windfall developments, etc., which aren't in the plan. And this is more Gordon's bag than mine, so I'll stop there because I'll start getting into areas that I don't know enough about. I suppose the key point from an education perspective, though, is you have to be aware that when we're responding to planning applications, our duty is to outline how we will mitigate those issues. Our responsibility is not to say you can't develop here. We don't have that luxury. We have to say this is what we will do if this happens. And so that's how we respond to planning. And as Mrs. Morton rightly points out, there's housing going on in steps where we had to explain to the reporter how we would mitigate that development, and that is what we have done. It is not action we wanted to take, but we have a responsibility to make sure that we can create the space if the housing comes forward. So we don't have we can't veto any housing within education. We can simply look at how we mitigate it or how we plan to mitigate it if it comes forward, because failure to do so, the advice we've had in the past, legal and from sort of external counsel, is that if we don't do that, the housing will still go ahead, but we simply won't get any contribution to that housing. So we have to look at it, I suppose we would say pragmatically, but I completely recognise from the community's point of view, it looks like we're just explaining this is what we will do, but that's because we have to put forward a plan as to how we would mitigate, even if that housing wasn't planned. So there could be housing. We could say a school's full, and we could say, as far as the local development plan's concerned, and as far as what we fed into the planners, that we do not want housing in an area.
I'm not talking about you can say a school's full, because you shouldn't have got to that point. You should know in advance, you should be planning years in advance that a school is capable of taking X number of students, and that you should know in advance that the population is likely to increase by X number on a year-to-year basis, and that so many of those students are going to go up to high school, etc. And then you've got the separate plan for the high school. You shouldn't be you should never ever be in the position of having to turn around and say at the last minute, oh, you can't do that development because that school's full. But what is your plan then for mitigating the situation that Auchinloch are in, where they have children at the moment who can't go to their local school?
That's not a position I recognise. I don't know of any catchment pupil who has been refused a place at their catchment school in Auchinloch.
So are they?
Can I comment then and say it is a situation I'm aware of? For instance, my neighbour next door, they have their son in the primary school currently. Their daughter, they've basically been told, is unlikely to get a place at the moment.
I would need to understand the case and speak to colleagues in education about that. I suppose to answer your question on Auchinloch, what we do when we look at schools is you can have a school that's full, and we have around 25% of our schools across North Lanarkshire are full, but they're not full of catchment pupils. So we build to catchment. So therefore, if a school, and Auchinloch is a good example of this, where you have a high percentage of pupils who are out with the catchment boundary, we expect to replace, as those primary sevens move out, the placing requests, we expect them to be filled by catchment pupils. So that's how we manage capacity. So a full school does not necessarily mean that we need to add capacity. It just it sometimes means we need to manage capacity in a different way, and in some cases that is refusing placing requests. So it is very likely the case that if someone wants to go to Auchinloch who doesn't reside within the Auchinloch catchment area, they would be told that they're unlikely to get a place. But if they reside within the Auchinloch catchment area, it's not something that's familiar to me that we as an authority have said that it's unlikely you'll get a place, because that's part of our duty is to create the place for the catchment pupils.
Right. So at the moment, if there are pupils who cannot get into Auchinloch School because there isn't capacity to take them, but you currently have students who are from a different catchment area but choose to go to Auchinloch for the better education, does that mean what are you going to do? Are you going to facilitate extra teacher and space for the Auchinloch students, or are you going to remove the other pupils and put them back to their own catchment schools?
No, this is a scenario I don't recognise as being a scenario that would play out. So once a child's in a school,
Well, it is playing out. It's not a case of whether you recognise it. It is playing out. So what I'm asking is,
Carol, you've got to let
Can we
Charles
calm
finish.
down?
You have to let Charles finish.
It's not a scenario that is I recognise as something that happens. Once a child's in a school, they're in a school. What I'm saying is, as the next intake comes in, if that school is full and we need the places for the catchment pupils take priority. If there is space in a school and if there is enough catchment pupils in there and there's still a space, there is a legal obligation to give that space up to a placing request, even if we know that in 2 or 3 years' time we need that place for a catchment pupil. So it's a balancing act between the pupils moving out in primary 7 matching the pupils that we want to move in primary 1. But as I say, we are not aware, or I'm certainly not aware of a situation where we are letting in placing requests and we are not letting in catchment pupils, and there is no school that I'm aware of where a placing request once in has been removed from that school. Once you're in, you're in.
It's Brandon, Charles. I think in our particular case, it's not a placing request, and it's purely a situation that there isn't the capacity in the school. There aren't the people moving out of the school to allow the youngster to get in, so to speak.
Yeah, I'm quite happy to take this offline and look into the specific case. Yeah.
It's just an example. Colin McIntyre.
Thank you, Brandon. That's quite exhausting, and it's quite kind of can echo the thoughts of Carol, Alice, and Isabel. I think just looking at the creation, it's really encouraging to see that build is progressing. There is the catchment of the clinic, which hopefully isn't going to cause a lot of problems and cause any other capacity in the future. So hopefully that's been looked at from a capacity problem. Going back to the Christen High School, what does it mean we'll become an anchor town hub? I mean, what does this mean? Does that mean there's going to be amenities in there, or is it just the fact that Christen High School is going to extend into that area? Is there going to be more? There's a lot of consultation about Cumbernauld, about the town centre, all that kind of stuff. What does this mean for Christen?
So for Christen High, each of the 9 local areas, boards areas, have at the core a town hub. So in some areas like Cumbernauld, where there is, so this whole programme is predicated around pre-1996 establishments. So where there is a pre-1996, so that's basically schools that were built before North Lanarkshire existed. So in the Northern Corridor, there is only one high school, and town hubs are anchored around a high school. So that's why we use the word anchor. So because there is only one high school, and because that high school is post 1996, the programme and the policy and the strategy within the programme is to look to adapt that facility to work more effectively and efficiently for the community. So there are 3 areas across North Lanarkshire which fall into the same situation. So we've got the Northern Corridor, we've got Coatbridge, and we've got Shotts. So in those 3 areas, we are looking to adapt the current models in order to deliver what we would want to deliver through a town hub, and that's essentially making it more available to the wider community, both during the school day and out with the school day. So what that will look like in Christen is dependent on what we can deliver in that facility. because there is housing growth within Christen, there is a requirement for us to put an extension onto the high school. So as we're putting that extension onto the high school, we can also look at what other facilities and amenities are required to serve that as a town hub facility. And we would then look to build that into the model as we bring forward the extension. So in that respect, it's kind of in a better position than Coatbridge and Shotts, because we've got an opportunity to increase the services and offer here, rather than simply try and adapt the building to function better, which is the case in Shotts and in Coatbridge. So that's what we talk about when we're talking about anchoring it. It's around using the facilities of the high school and making them more accessible to the local community.
Thank you, Charles. Levi White.
Hiya. My question is kind of a centre around your figures and stuff for Christen Primary School. So you have said there that you've catered for all known housing with Christen Primary School. Where are you taking those figures from?
The housing land audit.
Okay, so when we put in a Freedom of Information request for projected school roles, and we were told that that was something that would not have any form of access to, was that misinformation that we were given? We should have been able to get access to projected school roles.
The school would have been based on the projection at that time. So projections change every year. So they're a dynamic thing, and as such, they're always essentially in draft. You don't have a fixed school role projection. It stays static. So I suppose it would depend on what question was asked and how it was interpreted.
So what would your wording be then for me to be able to have a figure that the council have in mind at the moment for Christen High School, Christen Primary and its feeder schools?
It would be, I suppose it would be the calculation that was made when Christen Primary School was spec'd would be a good place to start.
Okay, and I've also got another wee question. You've mentioned between yourself and Gordon multiple times about extensive consultation with communities. Do you, as a department or as a council, have a consultation policy? Like what steps should be adhered to throughout that process?
So there's this statutory education consultation it's a statute, so it's guided by a set of guidance as published by Scottish Government. So you can just search for statutory education consultation and you'll be able to find the document. It's clearly within the public domain around how a local authority has to consult on either the changement of a catchment boundary, the changement of location of a school, or there's different criteria in which we need to consult, and it tells us exactly how we need to do it, who we need to involve, the length of time, how we need to report it. Education Scotland actually come in and audit whether or not we've followed the guidelines, etc. So it's a national set of standards we need to follow.
Okay, thank you.
Michael McPake.
Thanks, Chair. Charles, first and foremost, thanks for all the hard work you're doing here, and especially round about the work you've done in Gartcourse Primary School. We know it's not quite over the line yet. I'm quite confident that you and your team will get it over the line. But Charles, I want to ask about the plan here in place. There's no mention of Glenboig whatsoever on here. And I can go back to as far back as 2014 when you just came into post. You gave us a briefing then saying that there would be a need for future school in Glenboig by around about 2023. And I know a lot of things have happened in between times. I'm not expecting to be a new school next year. But can you comment on why there's been no mention of Glenboig on here? Thank you.
Yeah, sorry, Councillor McPake, that's my mistake. Rightly or wrongly, assumed Glenboig was part of the Coatbridge local area. I can give you an update, I can give you an update on Glenboig. So yes, we have identified a bit of land for the new school in Glenboig. As with all things, we are constantly monitoring what's coming forward when. So whilst the housing land audit has a guesstimate of what housing will be brought forward when, but it's essentially down to the house builder as to what developments are brought forward. So we are constantly looking at the completions and how many completions are done in any given area to look at which projects we need to advance ahead of others. And I suppose that's a long way of saying that the housing that's coming forward in Glenboig is at a slower rate just now than the housing in the other areas that we are concentrating on. And so as a result, we don't need to bring that school forward as quickly as we possibly thought we did 4 or 5 years ago, because the completion rate has dropped. So therefore we're constantly looking to, and it goes back to a comment that somebody made earlier, we are constantly looking to deliver the solution at the right time, but you have to realise it takes at least 3 years to build a school off the back of first of all having funding in place, then having the statutory education consultation, then having the design and build process. So it's a constant change. But I suppose, just to answer the question, Glenboig is still in there. It's still programmed as part of the overall programme, and we're looking at it and trying to balance that against when we actually need that capacity down in that area.
Thanks very much for that, Charles. Thank you. Thanks, Chair.
Andrew McPherson.
Yeah, thanks, Brandon. Yeah, it was just to say, I'm conscious this is taking up a lot of time, and I can understand why it's taking up a lot of time. And I think, this was why the suggestion was that we have this as a standalone item through the community forum. But I'm conscious of the time. We're only 50% through the actual presentation, and we've still got a significant agenda ahead of us. So I think it would probably be best if we moved on, Chair, just to the next item, so we can give everybody that's actually came here the opportunity to speak to the items that are here for.
Whilst I hear what you say, the key reason for this presentation was the request of the people that are at this meeting. And at the time when it was requested, we didn't have such an extensive agenda on the cards. The agenda seems to have grown in very recent days, but thank you for that. Just a quick question, last question then, from Teresa Aiken.
I just kept my hand up there because it's the second time I've had up, Brandon, first time been noticed. Michael McPake just asked my question there, so my update was about Glenboig. But one thing I would like to say, I think it's a travesty what's happening in the Northern Corridor in relation to especially education, housing, and especially in Gartcosh. I think that people should they should be listening to the people in Gartcosh. There's land being identified. They have no park. They have no community centre. They have no swing park for the kids. They've no amenities whatsoever. And there's a lot of work being done by the groups in Gartcosh, especially Isabel. She comes to the table at every meeting, and states her case. And I really think, that us as community members are not being listened to by any of the officers in the council. And I think that really has to be taken on board. Something has to happen here. We've been sitting around this community board in these Northern Corridor community forums and the lap tables for years now, and we're not making any progress in anything that we're asking for, basically. We get presentations, and it seems to be the same presentation that comes up every time in relation to planning. Now it's in relation to education. I wish people would come with more lay terms that we can all not understand, that will take us forward, basically. None of the presentations that we're having, none of the people that are coming to the table are given in the corridor, and I really think it's time we were listened to. And I think that Alison, Isabel and the other people that have spoken have already articulated that. It's time we were listened to, and it's time we were moving on in these community boards, because we're sitting here night after night after night at the meetings. I know it's only four a year, but it's a lot of time and effort that's going into what we're doing in our communities. So please, someone somewhere has to start listening to what we're doing.
Hear, hear.
Thank you, Teresa. Gary Woods.
Thanks, Chair. First and foremost, thanks for the invite to the board meeting tonight. For those that don't know me, and I'm acutely aware Gordon's briefly introduced me, I'm the Transportation Manager for North Lanarkshire Council, with a wide remit of disciplines, including road safety engineering, development management, parking services and transport planning, the latter of which I guess is why I've been invited to attend this evening. Next slide, please, Christine. Yep. So the publication of our active travel strategy is a game changer for the authority and aims to put active travel at the heart of our transport policy and plans for our new town and community hubs and the wider communities. Next slide again, please, Christine. as can be seen from this slide, you know, the objectives are to increase the number of journeys to work using active travel means, increasing the number of cycle parking spaces that are attractions, introducing additional walking, wheeling and cycling. I think that's a given. Encouraging the uptaking of additional schemes, active travel schemes, and even looking at the last point, it's often forgotten about, but targeted improvements to active travel in areas where, you know, they're high in the list of the SIMDs, you know, the sites that are subject to deprivation in areas, and to enable us to try and combat transport poverty rather. Yeah, so next slide please again, Christine. Hopefully the two maps here outlines the network vision. On the left, hopefully you can gleam out the detail which shows essentially all the major settlements in North Lanarkshire and the timescales it would take to commute to them in non-motorised means. On the right, you should hopefully get a better flavour of not only the major settlements, but also the key attractions, desire lines and public transport infrastructure. Providing better active travel connectivity will give the council a far better chance at succeeding in delivering a modal shift from car use to non-motorised modes of travel, and in doing so, hopefully improving the health and well-being of our communities and also achieving a reduction in vehicle emissions. Next slide, I guess, again, please, Christine. So yeah, I guess you're wondering what this means for residents and communities in the Northern Corridor. Well, we've identified a few key and strategic projects to satisfy the objectives of the strategy, namely looking at the North-South Corridor, improved active travel links between Coatbridge, which is essentially Drumpelia Country Park and Muirhead, as well as a East-West Corridor, improving linkages between steps in the western ends of Cumbernauld at Kindorit. It's also worthwhile pointing out that local neighbourhood routes are equally important, and we've identified Gartcosh to Glenboig and Muirhead to Moodiesburn as projects where we'll realise huge benefit. Notwithstanding the council projects referred to, we're also actively engaging with the private sector and volunteer groups to deliver better infrastructure. Some examples of this are the Glenboig and Gartcosh CGA, where we're currently reviewing active travel proposals. We're also asking for housing developers to provide infrastructure in and around their sites, and we've also had some initial engagement with NCCV regarding the Seven Locks project. Next slide again, Christine. So I'm conscious of time. That was just a very brief and quick overview of our intentions in moving away from a car-dominated society. The full detail of what we're setting out to achieve can be found, you know, by visiting the web link on the slides, essentially, or by searching in the council's website. Any questions?
From me here in Auchinlock, we have no connectivity whatsoever with the rest of North Lanarkshire. We can't even get our local public right-of-way between here and Steps made usable. What would you be doing for us here?
I could check on the strategy, but notwithstanding that, Chair, we could at least do some initial investigations to get a full understanding of the constraints on site, and if, you know, would be receptive to engaging a consultant to look at it in a bit more detail to determine what we could achieve as well. And if there were any deliverables, then we'd consider it in and amongst the strategy. But there are, it's worthwhile pointing out, there are priorities within the strategy, and if you get a chance to look at the document, I would encourage you all to do so. The initial priorities are in and around the council's hubs, which Charles and I think Gordon also referred to as well, but it doesn't mean to say that's the only things we'll be looking at. There'll be other things rumbling on in the background.
I'm afraid, unfortunately, that's where we always seem to fall foul of not actually meeting those types of criteria. Anne-Marie Kirkland.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Brandon. Hi, Gary. I am a lifetime resident of one of those communities that you mentioned that fall into the SMID stats. Now, we live in an ex-mining community. We don't have a bus service. We don't have access to those appropriate pathways. I'm aware that we live on what is the boundary of the Seven Lochs Wetland Nature Reserve, which you'll be very well aware of. And I am also aware that there is funding in place to put the pathways to right there. Now, we live right on that boundary which falls into Glasgow City Council. Do you have any partnership working with them? Because I'm aware that there's funding being in place for improvements to what is those historical paths there for a number of years, and nothing has happened with it. There's been extensive community consultation on it. It's connected to the Strathkelvin railway path system, and nothing has happened with it. We also have had funding in place in this community in Cardown for an active travel hub. We have identified all available land where that would be suitable within our own community to North Lanarkshire Council, and yet still nothing has been done. So if you could answer me on those two items, please. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks, Anne-Marie. Yeah, in terms of the first question, we have met with Glasgow as part of a wider discussion around the Seven Lochs project. I have been asked to have a further discussion about it, and me and my colleagues will hopefully be having those discussions in the coming, hopefully the next month or so. And after then, we might get a better feel of where we're at and how quickly we'll be able to deliver a lot of that. There is a slight caveat in that it's a huge project. The Seven Lochs project is a huge undertaking. A lot of the detail is still unknown about land ownership and everything, so it's unlikely to be delivered in what I would class as a short term. But we will be working with our project partners in that. I can give you that assurance.
If I could just come back to you on that note then, Gary, with regards to what you're saying about not knowing the landowners and such, with regards to the funding that's in place for the pathways that I'm identifying, I know who the landowners are. Yeah. So I can give you that information. So if you would like to extend the invite in these upcoming conversations, I would really like to be involved in that if possible.
Yeah, it's been chaired by Graham Ferguson at Seven Lochs, but yeah, I'll make him aware of that.
Super. If you could extend the invite and the details over to me, that would be fantastic. And obviously, if you can address the issue with the active travel hub for our area also, thanks.
Will do.
Carol Henderson.
Thank you, Brandon. Gary, don't get me wrong, I am all for active travel. Cyclist myself, cycle trainer, walking activities, all the rest of it. But there are people in this community that can't get public transport to their local doctor. Now, I don't know, the roads are not in any state for, some of the roads are not in any state for active travel. You're more likely to damage yourself than get from A to B. And as for walking or cycling, have you ever cycled on any of our roads between one village and the next?
Yeah, if I can come in on that point, Carol, if I may. The approach the council's taken in terms of active travel is for our strategic journeys, it won't be on road. It'll be through a series of shared paths, so it'll be improved, widened shared paths. On street, we'll still have a role to play, but it will be in low risk environments. You know, streets designed with a 15 kph design speed, so we won't be asking for cyclists to be travelling on. I'll just throw a route out there, the A752 between Coatbridge and Glenboig. Clearly that's not Glenboig, sorry, Gartcosh. Clearly that's not a reasonable setting to be cycling on. And it's not just footways. You know, we're looking at core paths, other even council facilities, the leisure parks and country parks and so on.
But looking at transport overall, I mean, there are people who can't get from one village to the next due to lack of public transport.
Yeah, that's what we're setting out to try and achieve as part of this strategy.
Yeah, but not all of them are capable of active travel.
Yeah. Yeah.
So what has been looked at for the people who can't get from A to B, or the people who need to go to their doctor and things like that, and they don't have any public transport to get from one village to the next?
Yeah, well, that's you know that's discussions that we need to have by SPT as well. Is they're obviously they manage the subsidised bus services in North Lanarkshire. I don't know, I'll be honest and upfront, I don't know the statistics for the area and where the subsidised services are, or indeed if there's likely to be a change in that going forward. You know, we don't have a municipal bus franchising service in North Lanarkshire, and frankly, I don't think we ever will. But yeah, I don't know the absolute answer to that question, unfortunately, because I don't know, you know, where the real issues are. But I'm happy to discuss that with the SPT.
The SPT work as a third sector group, or a third party as a contractor on behalf of North Lanarkshire Council. So it's the council that put to them what they want them to do. So if you're the transport manager for the council, how do you not know what the council actually want them to do? Why can the council not just say, look, we need to increase better public transport between these villages in the Northern Corridor, etc.? I mean, we can't get public transport from one village to the next, never mind, for example, from our village to the new hospital that's going to be built in Western Moffat.
Yeah.
So it's the council's responsibility, and the council then put that to SPT to activate for them. It's the council that deal with it, not SPT. The SPT do not make the decisions.
Yeah. I'll probably need to do a bit of research on this, Carol, because I'll be honest, I don't know. I don't know what the figures are for the area, but I'm happy to go back and find that and report back.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. And finally, Claire Williams.
Hi there, thanks, Brandon. Just to say, welcoming Gary's news that there's been work between Moodisburn and Muirhead. It's been a community ambition to improve those pathways for 5 years, and we have a massive load of documents on community consultations around active travel in the Northern Corridor, and it would be really useful to kind of look at them again, and really look forward to seeing some kind of partnership working with. A lot of this work can be led by community groups, so I'm really looking forward to seeing how the council will take that forward.
Yeah, thanks, Claire, and yeah, we're always happy to have those discussions. I believe you were also at one of the meetings we had with, but I'm sure you were at the NCCV meeting we had around the 7 walks, weren't you?
Yeah.
And yeah, I think it's in everybody's best interest to look at this.
Look forward to it.
Thank you very much. Can we move on to Raymond Taylor, please?
Okay, thank you, Chair. Thanks, Brandon. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
I'm going to my first slide then if I can. So that's entitled Winter Planning, Enhanced Support for the Business Case. So what I'm going to talk about for the next couple of minutes is about £14 million that we intend to invest across North Lanarkshire, not just in the Northern Corridor, on social work, social care and health services. But before I do that, I just wanted, and just to make the point that in terms of local authority services, social work and social care receives significantly more money for health services in comparison with colleagues in housing and education, so we're a wee bit better placed. But before I do that, I just want to say something about the Christen Clinic. I know that Evelyn Ryan, who would normally be here, would want to update you on the fact that work is ongoing with Greater Glasgow Health Board to repatriate services, which include community diabetic services, community mental health services, dietetics, physiotherapy, sexual health services and substance misuse. So they're all services that we intend to take over from Glasgow within the course of the next 18 months and will be made available along with a range of other services at the new Christen Clinic. There may be questions about that, but that's detailed work that's currently ongoing. I'd like to move to my first slide first of all, and I'll do my best to avoid using jargon, but I don't promise that I'll succeed. If you look at the little man in the right hand corner, can you see him there? It looks like 3 bags of coal he's carrying. So that's about future demand that we know that is around just now and will increase over the next few years. And it comes from the consequences of the health consequences of the pandemic due with COVID-19, demographic changes that we already know about, older people living longer, and younger people, particularly with disabilities, living longer as well, which is all to the good. And then just as has been evidenced tonight, demand for services and better quality services. So that's demand that we know that's coming. What we have in North Lanarkshire is a long tradition of very positive relationships between services and the public. Over the past 20 years, generally, we've moved out of delivering services based in buildings and have moved towards delivering services in people's own homes. And the plan is over the next few years is to build on that. So already we have integrated day services and integrated rehab services. They're services that bring together a range of healthcare professionals, physiotherapists, occupational therapists, along with social workers to deliver services primarily in people's own homes. We're linking those services to discharge arrangements, bringing people out of hospital as soon as we can, and investing more money in integrated equipment and adaptation services. Within Lanarkshire, there are probably more hospital beds in the community than there are in the 3 hospitals themselves. And that's a reflection of the extent to which that initiative is already in place. We also have self-directed support, and we'll continue to invest in self-directed support. And that's where we have individual care plans and care packages that for those who are eligible receive direct payments, or we can support them in purchasing services to keep people in their own homes and in their own communities. I can move on to the next slide, please, if you can, Christine. Thank you. So our plan is, as we spend this money, and we do need to spend it in the money, because we don't spend it, we lose it. And one of the major items of expenditure is on staff. And within North Lanarkshire, we compete with South Lanarkshire, we compete with Greater Glasgow Health Board and Forth Valley Health Board for doctors and nurses and social workers and radiotherapists and physiotherapists and the like. So our plan is to do things, and as we do things, to evaluate how they're going and to build on them and to improve how we're doing things. But a key element of that will be recruitment and retention. And the next slide, please, Christine. So the plan is to enhance our current assessment and planning arrangements, to review care packages that are to ensure that they're meeting people's needs and they're providing value for money, and building on people's strengths. And so we do that by using each of the encounters we have, the people who use services, to ask them what they want in their own life and to help them as far as possible achieve that. We do that bearing in mind people's human rights, that the fact that people will have capacity for the most part and they want to make their own decisions about their lives. Increasingly, we're aware of the impact of trauma on the lives of some people, and taking account of that as we deliver our services. But again, trying to do that in people's own homes and to deliver services quickly, safely and effectively. moving down to the middle of the slide on the left-hand side there, which says health and well-being. A large part of that is about encouraging people to be active travellers and to get out and walk and cycle and the like, to take care of their own health and to take preventative approaches to delivering services, to try and anticipate need, and also, and this is a major change, promoting self-assessment. So having programs that are available, IT programs that people who can access them, can use them to learn about services they might access that enables them to live more richer and fulfilling lives, and helping people themselves identify the outcomes that they want for themselves and how they can achieve that. And that's all about rehabilitation, re-abling people. Maybe as they come out of hospital after an operation for a hip replacement, to get literally on their feet as quickly as they can and to recover and to gain as much independence as possible. And that's about having a whole system approach. So it's about social work staff working with health staff and colleagues in education and housing, the independent sector, and most importantly, individuals, the families and the community around them to help bring about those kind of changes in people's lives that I'm describing, and trying to maximise choice and control. So I'll move on, if I can, Christine, to the next slide. I'm going to talk about 3 major areas of expenditure that will be that we're already investing in, but we aim to make best use of over the course of the next 2 years. So £9 million will be invested in assessment and planning. So that's building up and increasing the workforce in those integrated rehab teams, increasing the number of social workers we've got in our hospital teams to get people out of hospital as quickly as we can, to strengthen our community nursing teams, including our district nursing teams, to move to extending out of hours health and social care services into people's homes. We've got 3 particular programmes that are about trying to make best use of our resources to get people out of hospital as soon as possible. One of those is discharge without delay. Another one is discharge to assess, and what that means is that as soon as the doctor says somebody's ready to go home, we get them home and then we assess them in their own home. And the other one is planned date of discharge. And the idea there is that if you go in tomorrow with a hip replacement, then we ask the doctors to tell us when you're likely to get out in order that we can put in place services for those people who require it on the day that they anticipate they'll be coming out back into the community. The next slide, please. So the next area of expenditure is £4.5 million in direct service provision. So that's putting money into home support services, our own home support services in the local authority, and also the independent sector. Increasing our expenditure on community alarm so that people can seek support from out of hours and in-hours specialist services who require it. Using telecare, health and telecare to create digital solutions that people can use to keep themselves safe in the community. Increasing our expenditure on aids and adaptations. That's about helping people make adaptations to their own homes. Some of those will be temporary and some of them will be more permanent. Looking at actually delivering care which is currently based in hospital in people's own homes. So having nurses and doctors going in and out of people's own houses for some medical and health interventions. And also investing in the voluntary sector, in particular with voluntary North Lanarkshire, to create community solutions programmes. And a lot of that will be about suicide prevention and also tackling isolation that people might experience in the community. And thirdly, the area of expenditure we need to spend some money on over the next period is infrastructure. So that's about human resources, finance, project management support to ensure all this work is delivered on time. Staff will support quality assurance and performance, and then increasing our social work capacity. We also need to take account, finally, of all of the pressures that are on health and social care staff to invest in those staff to make sure that we're enabling them to work as effectively as possible and having a good work-life balance. And I think the next slide, if I can, Christine. this is my last slide. So the intention is to make best use of that very exciting £14 million of expenditure to enable people to live flourishing lives within North Lanarkshire and help people make North Lanarkshire the best place to live, work, and also to experience care. And all of that is about creating lasting and sustainable change. I can make those slides are taken from a video that we've made. I can make that available. There's the whole video. If people would find that helpful, Brandon, I can send out the YouTube link. I'll stress though, it's been designed for staff rather than the public. So we're more than happy to make that available. And I can also share with you the locality profile that you may have already seen, which has been developed for the Northern Corridor, which highlights where our SIMD areas are and what some of the challenges that the health challenges that are in the Northern Corridor.
Thank you, Raymond. I think the key question that if I was a newcomer to the area moving into Stoneyets, which is being built at the moment, where would I find a GP?
Well, the main GPs, I think, for the now I'm not from that area, but it would be Christen, I imagine, Steps, or Dr. Nalagata's practice. And if you can drive, there might be GP services you can try and access in other parts of Cumbernauld, for example. But I think your question, can I just come back to you, Brandon? Yes. There's no doubt, though, and I've been at a meeting about this today, the pressures on GPs are phenomenal, and work has been undertaken to encourage doctors coming off the courses to make GP, being a general practitioner, their career of choice. And we're having some success in that area, but I don't underestimate the challenge that there is in relation to that. One of the things we've also put in place to support the GPs are what they call advanced nurse practitioners. So that's nurses who are employed by GP practices, bearing in mind that GPs are all self-employed. So GPs are now employing nurses. Some of those nurses are actually becoming members of the staff team themselves, and they can do nurse prescribing and do many of the things that GPs can do. So.
Yes, I'm aware of that. Anne-Marie Kirkland.
Thanks, Brandon. Hi there. Just looking at your presentation is obviously as going forward, and you're speaking of the new clinic at Christen, etc. My concern is the issues that people are experiencing right now. Now, this is only Wednesday, and as a community representative, I'm now on my 6th call from people who cannot access their doctor, who cannot access vital mental health services. They're promised appointments. They have telephone calls that are supposed to come back to them. Today alone, I had a young lady who had to spend over 2 hours with, who was supposed to receive support from the mental health care team, and she's now waiting 10 days later, and still no one has been in touch with her. So this is not just a one-off. This is continuously, week after week, for residents that are living in these communities, and it's just not good enough.
Can I just stop you there? I'm right in the middle of that. I do that all day, every day, so I'm very aware of the pressures. In terms of the individuals, particularly the pressures in contact with GPs, but if there are particular individuals who are concerned about, what I ask you to do is send me an email about it. I'll put my email in the chat in just a minute, so I can pick those things up. Because if it's the case that people are being told that a nurse is going to phone them back within 10 days and that's not happened, then that's something I need to pick up. So.
Yeah, but I'd also like to state that as a volunteer in these communities, your time's very limited because you have other responsibilities in life. So if the choice is sitting in front of a computer and having to email services that are already supposed to be in place to support these people, and they're absolutely failing, then I'm better served spending those 2 hours with that young lady, or we're not preventing those issues that you are speaking of.
And some of that isolation, I think you're right there, it's about trying to build on the connections that people have in their own communities, so that and they can build on these natural supports. But I need to say again, Annie, in terms of individuals, if there's any concerns about that, if you drop me an email.
Yeah, so as a community representative, we have contacted NHS on numerous occasions with many ideas of wellbeing activities, different services that our volunteer group are willing to participate and get involved in, and we've still not had any interaction. So again, it's failing there. We're attending these board meetings time after time, we're listening to presentations, it all seems to be very much a lip service and things that are getting said, and none of these services are actually happening and supporting people at the grassroots of communities. It's just absolutely ridiculous.
And then you come back into, is it steps? What about Cardoon, did you say?
Yeah, I represent Cardoon Community Meadow. We are part of Steps in District. So when you look at our SMID stats, they will not flow up on your charts that are there in front of you. But if you look at Cardoon on its own, then it's a very different story.
Yeah.
But that's what's not happening. Individual communities are not getting looked at appropriately. There's no bus service in our community. There's no community centre. There's no immediate access to a doctor. Everything is out with what that community of Cardoon is.
Thank you, Anne-Marie. Greg Lennon? Or was your hand not meant to be up?
Brandon, I have my hand up.
All right, Isabel Kelly?
Yeah.
Hi, Raymond.
Hi, Isabel.
Hi. Raymond, thanks for the presentation. Again, I think there's cross purposes. Our main concern is the immediate access to GPs. The presentation was great. You gave a lot in social services. You told us about the 14 million. We don't actually know how much of that is actually going to be spent in the Northern Corridor in terms of an actual figure. But the GP is the clinical expert, and no one can access these services properly without having the clinical expert passing them on to the wider network and the wider team. Now, from a personal perspective, today I've just phoned up to get a neurophysiotherapist for my husband who has been discharged from December, and his rehabilitation is severely impaired because he is top of the list with the physiotherapists in North Lanarkshire. We have had 2 consultant letters written, and we have also had a referral from a neurophysiotherapist in the Queen Elizabeth Hospital. And we have had 3 phone calls from physiotherapy telling us John's top of the list. But we've never had a physiotherapist that's come out to the house. I've just engaged a private physiotherapist for the princely sum of £105 an hour to come out to the house to treat my husband, because I can't get that service from North Lanarkshire Council. I can't get that service from Lancashire Health. Now, if you can't see your GP, which has also been an issue, nobody can get to the mental health expert, nobody can get the social care, nobody can get the assessment done. The GP situation has to be sorted, and we have to think outside the box.
Yeah, I agree with you completely. Yeah, absolutely, I'd agree with you.
I appreciate there is not enough GPs. The training period is extremely long, but we can't sit back and say we need to wait. There is plenty of private GP services out there that take on from a digital perspective. We could take people who don't have chronic illnesses, who need GP access quickly. I've got a sore throat, I've got a chest infection, I've got this. If you had community nurses suitably qualified who could chaperone a patient in front of a screen where a GP is sitting on the other side of the screen from the privates, say under 60s, under 55s, with no underlying health conditions, where if you need a GP, and leave the GPs for the people who are chronically sick until you work your numbers up. You have to start looking outside the box. They are the clinical expert, and it doesn't matter what you put in place, Raymond, and what service you're trying to create. if people don't see a GP initially to get that referral or to get put to another person in the team, especially older people, they get blocked at the reception desk and they don't know, well, put me through to the practice nurse. They just get told, sorry, the appointment today's are full, you can't see a GP today. And they try again 2 days later. And I've had elderly people on the phone to me. One lady said she tried 105 times to get through to the Jameson practice. So I do realise that it takes a long time to train people. I do realise it's a nationwide problem, but you have to start thinking out the box. You can't, and the reason for the presentation wasn't for you to tell us about your £14 million and your cartoon 4 pages of presentation. It was about to tell us what is happening, what is the substance to the work being done so that people can get to a GP. That was really what we wanted. Yet again, the presentation misunderstood.
Well, certainly that, just to come back here on that as well, just in terms of your own situation, again, if you want to email me about that, and I'll try and find out in terms of your husband's own access to physiotherapy, that's fine. I was respond to the question which I was given, which was health and social care services. That was a specific question. There was nothing referred to about access to GP, so there may well have been some issue about communication.
I appreciate that, Raymond, because you're excellent in anything else I've ever approached you on.
Right. Thank you. Thanks.
Carol Henderson.
Thank you, Brandon. Raymond, hiya. Can I just check, one of the things, if you remember back to the last community board, I actually contacted you very shortly after it and asked that we had actually asked Evelyn for updates on the clinic, but there was she didn't know any of the answers, and I had actually requested that at this board meeting that it might be useful for yourself to attend with or without Evelyn, because we don't seem to get the correct or any relevant updates or be able to answer any questions that we actually ask when we're doing it. But can I ask you, with likes of the Jameson practice, and I know that they're my own doctors, and I know that they've got two sites, and I know that they're a teaching facility as well. So, and they always have training GPs in their practice. But how do you, if you know this, how do they decide when a GP practice is over capacity, or is it a case that each GP member of staff is allowed to have so many patients, and then if they just employ another GP, that then allows them to have, that excess number of patients?
I don't know the answer to that precise question, but you'll get practices which have got 15,000 patients, and you've got another maybe single hand who's got GP who's got 1,500 patients, but that GP might well bring in locums, or they might use an advanced nurse practitioner. Mm-hmm. And it's essentially what the GPs have is a contract with the health board to deliver a service. So I need to make themselves available for so many periods of time and satisfy the health board that they've got accommodation of a good enough standard, and that they're maintaining their own professional standards and so forth. But I'll try and find out whether or not there's a ceiling as to how many patients a GP is allowed to have.
What each individual GP likes.
Yeah, I know.
Many GPs, and then so many advanced practitioners, etc.
And we know precisely how many patients each practice has on its books, because GPs are paid for that by the health board. But I'll find out whether or not there's a ceiling and come back to you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much, Raymond, and thank you to all the presenters. And okay, there may have been some differences in the approach to the questions, but I think everybody has had a good opportunity to bring the matters forwards and get them opened up for everybody to discuss.
Chair.
Yeah.
Can I just ask? I don't seem to be able to put my email address in this chat. It's going. No, it's okay. I can do it. It's fine. Thank you.
Right. Okay. Thank you, Raymond.
Chair, sorry, apologies. I've tried to get in a few times, Chair. I was meant to come in with a supplementary at the times at Charles McCabe. You want me to leave it and just email him?
Yes, that might be useful. I did come to you, Greg, but you never answered.
No, I had a surgery at the same time, Chair, and I had 15 people show up. So unfortunately,
You were
timing is a wee bit off. It's a wee bit off, but I'll email him. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Greg. Agenda item 4 is community matters, input from local community groups. A quick one from me. The vice chair was formerly Claire Williams, and Claire has been very fortunate to be successful in gaining a seat on the council, but in so doing leaves us with a vacancy for the position of vice chair. I would like to put it forward for anybody to volunteer, and I would ask if there is anybody that would be able to just, shall we say, hold my hand occasionally, but I'm not going to give you throw the baby and the bathwater over you. Is there anybody that would be interested in taking that role? We knew that would happen, and fortunately I do have a plan B. Oh, Alice, you have your hand up.
My hand isn't up to self-nominate, Brandon.
Oh. Right, okay.
I currently have 4 jobs that I do, as you know.
Yes.
I would nominate Isabel Kelly if she was prepared to hold your hand, not physically.
Yes.
But perhaps in your absence, if Isabel was prepared to accept that nomination.
Isabel, would you like to?
I always like to be the mouthy one at a meeting, so when you're the chair, you actually have to have a different persona, such as Brandon's, so it really doesn't sit well. If there's only 4 meetings a year, Brandon, I expect you to be there the four meetings, so that means that I would never actually have to chair it, so I can still open my mouth as often as I do. If there's no, is there no one else would like to take it?
Isabel, I'd just like to say it never stopped me opening my mouth. So,
right. If there's no one else going to take it, then I'll take it then.
I will thank you for your support, Isabel. But no, it's not. I wouldn't wish to impose anything upon anybody. I'm just looking to make sure we've got people in place to keep us as a sustainable working group. Anne-Marie, were you going to say something?
Not at all. No.
Right. You wasn't going to volunteer. Okay. If no one has any objection, then thank you, Isabel, and I think we will accept that at this particular time. There was questions with respect to a consultation event that happened last October and the results from that event, and it's never really been answered. And I don't know if anybody has come with the answer today as to the participation levels. This is all about community engagement, and the thing that was being struggled to determine at the time was really how much community engagement was there in that particular event. I'm not sure who's going to pick up an answer.
Chair, I've got a couple of figures for you, if that's okay, if you don't mind. I can give you that. In terms of the online consultation, the one that people were asked to respond to, there were 23 responses from the Northern Corridor. And the other one that you'd mentioned to me as well was the actual, when you participated in the focus group, there were 13 people participated within that. I think there were a couple of young people involved in it that weren't kind of visible necessarily on the at the meeting, but were actually participating within that. So so that was the figures that I've been provided with.
I think the real crux of this matter is there were such small numbers. How could such a small group, should we say, provide the robust, should we say, representation for the Northern Corridor, which, should we say, this was in relation to budget cuts of £54 million. So we're talking about, in total, should we say, around about 20 to 30 people. It's not very representative, it would appear. And that's what we're trying to do. We want to try and improve the engagement, and I think we do need to do a lot more, because it doesn't seem to bear it out in those numbers. And the other thing that was asked related to the accessibility of documents, etc., around the community boards on the NLC website. Certainly, you don't really find much on the website to be able to tell you what community boards do, and I don't know if there's any way you can give some input on what's going to be done to improve on that.
Certainly, Brandon, we can certainly look into that. I know we've had that discussion kind of off the table, so we'll look into what the issues are in relation to that and see what's available currently, and we'll look to see how we can improve on that. But we'll get back to you and feed that information back.
Okay. The next is the LOIP updates. I believe you're going to present an update that you've received from Gary Stark.
Thanks, Chair. Just a quick update, you'll notice that there's a wee bit of a difference in terms of the agenda, in that there's more of a focus now on the priorities that were identified by local people within the Northern Corridor. And for people, I know a number of people around about the table that were involved in that engagement process, and will be aware of this, but I understand that there's new people around about the table tonight as well. So there's 6 priorities identified through the LOIP process. Brandon's mentioned a few already: health inequalities, children and young people, social integration and inclusion, community transport, which has been mentioned in the meeting earlier as well, Moody's Burn West, and building relationships, trust and communication. So that's the 6 priorities. In terms of the update, I understand from Gary Stark that a couple of meetings have taken place with board members who have expressed interest in being involved, and I know some of you are around the table tonight. And I wanted to thanks to those people who have expressed an interest and have been involved to date. We are keen, and it's at an early stage at the moment, but there's still opportunity for anybody who might be interested in being involved in the LOIP process to become involved in subgroups that will look to work towards actions that will achieve the outcomes that have been identified in terms of priorities for the local community. So we hope to kind of send out an email to board members. I would ask you to think about where your particular skills lie, your experiences, your knowledge in terms of some of those priorities that have been identified, and think about which ones you would like to be involved in kind of putting your skills and kind of get involved in that process. What we hope to do is, obviously, the people that have been involved to date have been involved and been discussing things. We will be in contact with you soon to discuss this further. In terms of gathering, we intend to gather a list of people who would be interested. Now, just taking on board what people have mentioned around about the table, Robin, for example, mentioned his work with young people. We've got MSYPs in the meeting tonight as well. There's a number of people around the table with key skills and experiences that really could support this development, to look at how we make a difference to the local community. So we keen to engage with you. If you're interested, you want to find out more information from us, then certainly we're happy to come out and have those discussions with you. Brandon, I notice, I think Councillor Williams has got her hand up.
Thanks, Christine.
Yes, okay, yes, I couldn't see that, but yes.
So Christine, I was previously involved in the subgroups, and it's just to find out if I can continue to be so. No.
Yeah, councillor, it's not a difficulty for councillors to be involved. Certainly, we're looking for the experience from a variety of kind of backgrounds, whether it's if you're a local community rep, you're a local person, then we're keen to have the right people round the right tables to make sure that we can make a difference. Now, what I would say as well is that I understand that community organisations may well not have the capacity to be involved in them all, but that's okay, because what we're hoping to do is to meet in between the board meetings to progress actions, but we will feed back those updates and the feedback to the boards when it comes round the cycle. So a lot of that work will take place in between board meetings. What I would ask though is, rather than, not to say that people can't be involved in all of the subgroups, but in terms of capacity, if there's other people within your organisation that might be interested in being involved, maybe they could be involved in some of the subgroups while others could be involved in other ones. So, but we're happy to have those discussions with you, and we'll do that. But I will send round an email to everybody. If you can think about that, we'll also circulate information about the LOIP as it's been agreed to date through the board, so that for new people that are maybe coming along to the board meetings, they're able to see what the process has been, but also to get an idea about what they might be interested in being involved in. So that's all I wanted to say just now, Chair. Happy to take any questions.
Any questions for Christine on the LOIP?
Chair, I think Carol has her hand up.
Yes, I found it now. Yes, Carol Henderson.
Brandon, it's not really a question. My only concern is that I realise we've got two what is it, MSYPs on the board tonight, but neither of them are participating in anything in the Northern Corridor. They both seem to be Coatbridge area, so I think it would be better to get young people who are actually living in this area, as opposed to people who, just because they're a part of an organisation, but they don't actually have any connection or even attend anything in this area to join these subgroups.
Chair, is it okay if I answer, Carol?
Yes, it is, yes.
Carol, yeah, I would agree. The MSYPs, just to explain, have been voted in by young people from across Coatbridge and the Northern Corridor area. But I do agree that we would be looking for young people locally to be involved in this process. And certainly Peter, already in his kind of discussions with local community groups and organisations, is starting to identify who may potentially be interested in being involved. And certainly we will have those discussions locally with young people and with organisations that are working with young people to make sure they're included in that process as well. So definitely we would agree with that. Yeah.
Anne-Marie?
Thanks, Brandon. Christine, I would just like to say our community organisation would like to be involved in that. Again, it's the availability of the volunteers. We do have 4 fantastic young youth volunteers who have recently just completed their first aid course. They've been involved in different things, and I would love to speak to them to see if we could get them more involved, because I think they would have a fantastic input.
That's great, Anne-Marie. Thanks very much for that. And certainly Peter will be in contact with you to kind of discuss that further. But yeah, if they're doing that kind of work anyway, it's really important that we have them involved within that. So thanks for that.
Thank you.
Thank you for that. Christine, you're on again, this time local development and stroke investment.
Okay, thanks, Chair. Just quickly, this section of the agenda is to provide an opportunity for community groups and organisations and partners to share information about local engagement that might be taking place. Now, the engagement could be in terms of consultations or things like that, but also to find out and share information about funding opportunities that might be available. So certainly I'm not going to say any more than that just now, but if it's okay, Brandon, can I ask Peter maybe to tell us a wee bit about an engagement consultation that he's been involved in locally? Would that be okay?
Yes, please.
Thanks, Christine. Thanks, Chair. I'll be very brief. I've met some of the groups. Fantastic amount of work going on in the Northern Corridor. It doesn't really need me to say that, but I do feel it has to be highlighted, some of the work that's going on. I've had a chance to link in with Steps and District Community Council, and together we've carried out some consultations in Steps Primary and St Joseph's Primary around their local development programme proposal to improve pathways in a path adjacent to Steps Primary and look at improving the site as a nature trail. Really positive feedback from the schools. They're glad to be getting linked into community-wide stuff, and we'd be delighted to get a chat with the organisations in Northern Corridor, whether that's with you directly or through the new Community Matters mailing list we've set up, getting some good feedback from schools already. Also just wanted to mention that I attended the North Locality Health and Social Care Consortium recently. I'm glad to say there was a couple of reps from Northern Corridor there, and Alice Morton and Carol Henderson. And I think the views of the Northern Corridor were expressed quite explicitly by the members that we want to see more involvement, and particularly around the local activity funding package that they have at the consortium. It's a small grants programme of up to £30,000 that I think traditionally Northern Corridor groups haven't been able to access, maybe in the same detail as other areas that the North Locality covers. If any group's interested, there was an email sent out by the Northern Corridor Community Forum. If you're looking for any help or information or assistance to help draft an application or just some more details about criteria, please feel free to get in touch. I'm happy to have those discussions and hopefully get some more applications into that fund from Northern Corridor. And just finally, I was just going to say, Carol, Christy and I are happy to come out and get a chat with yourself and the Mollinsburn Tenants and Residents Association to discuss the wall. We had been told that, I think Gary had tried to contact you, maybe he got you when you were out working, but we're happy to pick that up now. I'll maybe drop you an email with potential dates and times to maybe come out and meet you guys, if that sounds okay. And I'll just leave it there, guys, short and sweet. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you. Moving on, the agenda moves on to standing agenda items. Community Champion update. Andrew?
Thanks, Brandon. Just a couple of quick things, just to let everyone know that North Lanarkshire Council has started its business startup grant. It's a two-tier one. There's £1,000 available for people running enterprises, businesses from their home, in other words, self-employed from the house, and then we can up to £2,500 for anybody that's using a commercial business. So that has been started, and I can give further details on that, include that in the minutes about contacts as well for that. So that'll be available for you. And just in a sort of more grander scale, I suppose that the UK Shared Prosperity Fund, which takes over from EU funding, that's now been allocated. North Lanarkshire have been allocated just under £14 million over the next 3 years. That seems to be more than the standard EU funding that we used to receive. So hopefully this new fund is more reflective of where the need is in terms of money, and that's both for capital and revenue projects. So there'll be, we're obviously engaging with local partners and stakeholders about how we can actually spend that money in sort of larger type projects across the council area. If I can just say, Brandon, as well, just I'm really actually delighted to see that there's actually new people on the board today. I know potentially they're here for one particular subject. I appreciate that, but it's really good to see some new faces, and we'd like to welcome them as well, because I think if Teresa, and I think Teresa's maybe left the call now, but Teresa did hit it in the head that, you know, as a board, we will be judged on what we deliver in the local communities, and I think, you know, we need to up our game now. We really need to start moving in things, and I think the LOIP is where we need to go. And just to, you know, welcome Christine, your sort of summary there, that we need to get the actions in place that we can now focus on and start making that difference in local communities. So I'm 100% behind it, and I'm happy to be involved in any of the focus groups as well. Christine. Thanks, Brandon. That's me.
You mentioned funds. Did you say EU?
No, it's the UK Shared Prosperity Fund, which takes over from.
Oh, right. Okay. I misheard. Sorry.
That's memory, Brandon.
All right. Isabel Kelly, you have your hand up. Or is that a hand up from a previous time?
No, it's for a community champion regarding the UK Shared Prosperity Fund. Could you forward me any information that you have on that? I actually contacted Greg and our MP regarding that fund. So if you've got the information in the officers, Gartcosh has 2 projects which can be rolled into one project, but it's two projects combined regarding making a bid for that fund. So any information that I could get on that, if you could maybe if you can send it to me and copy Greg Lennon. I've already sent Greg an email on the subject.
Okay, absolutely no problems at all, Isabel. I'll email yourself directly, and what I'll do is also, if it's okay with yourself, Brandon, I'll just include it. I'll just give a wee summary, include it in the minute as well.
Yes, thank you.
If I can get a bit of money, I'd added a school onto it, Andrew, but never mind.
Well, if you don't ask, you don't get it, Isabel, do you?
That's it.
Carol Henderson.
Thanks, Brandon. 2 things. Could I ask that, see instead of putting links to things or like providing updates for like so this funding and things like that in the minutes, because we don't tend to get the minutes until a lot later.
Carol, I have actually made a very strong representation that the minutes to this meeting should come out within 4 weeks of the end of this meeting, so that we don't have to wait so long.
Okay, well, what I was going to ask was if any of these links that any of the presenters or things like that are given, if they could be forwarded and circulated out to the members of the board so that we can actually activate them quicker than we're getting the minutes, you know, so that we can deal with it even within that 4-week period. But the other thing that I wanted to say is, you know, I agree that the board and Teresa's comments that, you know, there will be judged on the activities of the board and the achievements of the board. But I just feel that yet again, we're getting put down to the LOIP, and the LOIP subgroups yet again are down to the volunteers from the communities and things like that going along and doing all, you know, a lot of the work, etc. as well. The one big thing that we really need in order for this board to succeed is not for the volunteers that are already here every meeting, turning up at their own, you know, their own organisations meetings and things like that. They're there day in, day out doing all the work. It's not them that you need for this to succeed. It's the council officials to listen to the local people of this area. That is the one thing that is lacking in this board being able to achieve anything.
Matt Costello, you've got your hand up.
Thanks, Chair. It was just in relation to the request regarding information. We're obviously saying that we'll wait 4 weeks before we'd send any information out. If we're aware of any information that's relevant to the board, we do try and share that on a much more regular basis. So the board will probably receive quite a lot of updates in between board meetings, and we'll continue to do that. So I'll give that assurance, and we'll get that information out to people as quickly as we can.
Thank you. As it happens, Matt, you're the next up on the agenda, the local development programme update.
I think Andrew gets his hand up, Chair.
Who's who? I missed a hand. Where?
Andrew McPherson's gets his hand up.
He's hiding. All right. Yes, I found him. Yes, Andrew.
It's all right, Brandon. Yeah, just to come back in Carol's, but yeah, Carol, listen, I agree with you, but also do disagree with you in part. Yep, council officials, we do have to listen. Hopefully you're aware that I am listening, but the board is a mechanism for the local community. It is not a council organisation. This board will only succeed if we all come together. That is the community, the council, NHS, police, fire, everybody has to come together. That's the purpose of the board. This is not a council organisation. Now, I'm happy, when the council's at fault, we will take the blame for that. But it's important we all come together and work together. And that to me is the strongest message that has to come out.
I totally agree with you, Andrew. But as we've seen earlier on, the board is a mechanism for us all to work together and to gain information, etc. And as we can see earlier on, the board requested a presentation from the Education Department, and they've withheld that information. They've not given the presentation, and they're now not giving it until a decision has been made, and there is an announcement within the next 1 to 2 weeks. Now, that announcement and that consultation that they're waiting on to announce is absolutely nothing at all to do with the presentation. They were asked to come along to the board to give a presentation, and the council officials have refused to do that. Now, that is where I'm saying that there are people who do, and I'm not necessarily talking about yourself and certain other council officials, but there are officials who are not listening to the people of the community. And in order for us all to work together, they need to start listening. And that is the crutch of it. We cannot work as a team if there are people in the team that only have I.
Okay, thank you. Can we go now to Matt and his local development update?
Thanks, Chair. Just very briefly, Peter's already covered some of the aspects of this, but just the report that was sent out to you that provides updates in relation to the projects and proposed projects and the budgetary position regarding the LDP for year 2 of the capital programme going forward this year, and gives some further detail about the further budget for the next 3 years. The report also gives detail in relation to the project proposal process, which Peter has alluded to as well. And again, we would encourage any representatives in the area, elected members as well as community groups to pick up on in relation to the project proposal process. We're happy to support that process and encourage any ideas for projects that are available within the Northern Corridor that meet the criteria. So we're more than happy to pick up on that. So it's just encourage people to do that in relation to that aspect of the report, Chair. That's all I really want to say on that.
Any responses to what's happened with the year 1 projects?
I'm just looking at the report itself just now, Chair. Give me a wee second. Yeah, year 1, the Mollinsburn, the Auchin Lock project has been completed. There's details there in relation to the end of May. The work will be completed by the end of this month.
I would say the work hasn't even commenced, so it's unlikely to be completed.
Right, we can get further details on that. We're basing this report based on information we had just a wee bit earlier in the month. Other projects we're looking at further discussion and ongoing inquiries and discussion with local community groups is required, and we'll move those projects forward into year 2. I can give assurance to the local communities that the budget is protected for the LDP for those years, and if there has been delays in delivering the projects in year 1, they will be picked up in year 2, and we are actually hoping that if possible we'll be able to bring forward projects from future years if budget allows, but we very much will link in the local community groups to take those forward.
Have any year 1 projects been delivered?
Well, the project in terms of the entrance features were the main issue with the ones we had in there, Brandon, in relation to the projects we were having delivered for that. So that was the ones that were the main concerns. So those were carried forward because we didn't have sufficient community consultation and there wasn't sufficient information on that. But we've just slipped them into year 2 for delivery, and they will be delivered in year 2 going forward.
Okay, Carol.
Can I ask why the Mollinsburn wall is needing more consultation for an entrance feature, which is simply a wall, a dry stone wall, when it was actually agreed to give us the funding many years ago? Why are you suddenly now coming and saying that you need more public consultation on this when you can't even get? I mean, it's probably going to be a 6 metre long dry stone dike, and yet you're going to do more public consultation on that on a village of 47 houses than what you're doing on some of the things that are going on in the council area that are a damn sight more important than a 6-foot dike, likes of education and health.
We've got to consult on the projects we want to take forward, Carol. We don't deliver the projects that people don't give us their ideas about. We had designs put forward for that. They were rejected ultimately by the local group there. I think you were involved in that group. We've tried to get further consultation and engagement with you and the group to allow us to take that forward so that we're delivering what the community wants, not a design based on what we think should be there. That's why we need the further consultation.
Yeah, but why have you not done it in all the years that you've had between it being agreed to give us the funding and now?
Well, we did do it, but when it was...
You've not. I've not been consulted on it.
Well, I don't agree with you, Carol. We have taken that forward and we have presented designs. Ultimately,
You've not presented any designs to us. I would like you to.
Carol, we've asked for opportunities to speak to you off the table with this. I don't think it's appropriate to discuss it here. If we maybe can speak off the table regarding this, and we can try and take this forward with the team.
Right. Well, what I would like you to do is gather your meeting notes from the meeting that you had when you presented these designs to us, and then you can present them to me. Thank you.
So, I think if we could maybe make arrangements with yourself and the organisation you represent to allow us to look at the designs to take that forward, we can do that absolutely, and then we can pull together designs that suit the aspirations of the local area. We can get that drawn up, put it out to tender, and get that delivered as soon as possible. More than happy to take that forward. Thank you.
Just in addition to what Matt said there, Brandon, could I just respond to Carol? No?
Yes.
All I wanted to say is, Carol, myself and Peter are happy to catch up with you on that and have a discussion with you around about the kind of process. Right, thank you.
Can I just say that so far, from the way that Christine and Peter have conducted themselves, not disagreeing with not disrespecting the previous staff that were in position, like Sir Gary Stark, but there needs to be a far better connection with the community. And as for this, plans have been presented to us and meetings have been held and communications have been trying to go. My only contact number is a mobile phone, and I've got that with me 24 hours a day. So for council officials to sit there and say that I've not responded to things, when yet I'm the one who's actually been going on about it and asking for a wall and asking why you require an architect to design a 6-foot dry stone dike, I don't think you can sit there. And I'd like to see your evidence on any of your attempts to contact me. And you seem to think that there's not a Mollinsburn Tenants and Residents Association here. Well, you'll see when you turn up at the meeting.
Okay, Alice.
Thanks, Brandon. Matt, if you refer to Priority 1 Dunalister Play Park, you'll recall that should have been well underway by now, because I'd contacted you, I think, on a couple of occasions, and I noticed on the recent report that it's out to be re-tendered. And I had a conversation, Peter was at it with Christina, and she indicated that there really was quite a serious problem with tenders in that organisations were not available to carry out this work or the tender work on it. And this was the first time that Christina had ever experienced this. Could you maybe say a wee bit more on the delay and the difficulty here, please?
Absolutely. Yeah, the tenders, that went out to tender some months ago, Alice, as you're aware. I had that discussion with you some time ago. The situation was that we didn't actually get any tenders back from it. So we went through the process and nobody put in a tender for it. So therefore it had to be re-tendered. What's been happening over the last while due to a variety of reasons, Brexit, COVID, a number of things going on, is that the price, in terms of play areas in particular, we've had additional funding from the Scottish Government in relation to investing in play facilities. But the issue with that is so is the other 31 councils in Scotland. So therefore the demand placed on firms who provide this kind of work has increased dramatically. So therefore there is a number of agencies and businesses out there who can cope with that kind of demand has reduced, and therefore the capacity to deliver on projects has reduced also. Therefore that's resulted in no tenders being made because maybe there wasn't high enough a contract for them at that particular time. So what we're doing is through contracting and tendering, we're packaging things up to try and make it more attractive to the market and going out that way to try and do that. But we're working on that, and it's something that is a priority for us to do that. But it's a problem we're experiencing, but so is every other local authority in the country. On the basis of that, for the perfect storm of, as I say, Brexit, the COVID situation, and the additional resources in that particular field.
Matt, thanks very much for that. We have a community council meeting next week. Could you drop me a line or two just explaining that so that I can keep everybody up to date on the difficulties that you're facing with tendering?
No problem at all, Alice. I'll get that done.
Thanks, much appreciated.
Thank you. And finally, Claire Williams.
Hi, thanks, Brandon. Thanks, Matt. It's just to ask, I read through the process quickly there. So there's projects seeking approval that are due to get added. So do we take it that if we accept your report tonight, those projects go directly onto that list?
Yeah, that's right, Councillor Williams. We're looking to, the way the projects work, we're seeking for, like, in principle approval. There's a different process. What we want to do is keep everything moving so that when we do get to the stage, and even a few weeks' time, if things change for us, it allows us to start taking that forward and reporting that back to the board and to the relevant council committee as and when that's required. But if there's anything seeking approval there tonight, then that's what we're looking for.
It was just meant to see if we can get a bit more detail on those projects, because there's not much. There's quite a lot in some of them, but some of them are quite vague. So if we're actually given permission for these to go onto the list, if you like, then
yeah. But bear in mind, some of them will be at the very early stages of that, and it's part of the project proposal situation. Is we can take that forward. We'll then look at the feasibility of that. Some of them might not go ahead on that basis, and we'll report that back. But it's just to get them into the mix so that the board is aware of them. But a project proposal forum will be completed for every project, so there will be much more detail available for that, and that information can be shared with the board in more detail on that basis. But just so when we've got some ideas coming from groups that are encouraging their participation in the process.
brilliant. And just a final kind of add on to that, Matt. I see in the future projects list, you've still got Glen Manor Path on there. Does that mean there's more work to be done on that path? Because I see it's in place just now. So is there further path work to be done on that, or is that?
It's probably just to be further updated on that one, Councillor, just in relation to that particular pathway itself.
Right, brilliant.
But I can get a further update on that one to determine exactly where that particular one is at just now. But we just try to give a further update on that going forward.
Brilliant. Thank you, Matt.
Anne-Marie?
Thanks, Chair. I see Councillor McPake's in attendance. I would just like to ask an open question to him with regards to his lack of interaction with the Melon Group. Is there any particular reason why he's choosing not to respond to the numerous emails that he's received from them? As I also see it's noted in the chat from one of the members of that group.
It's not particularly an item for LDP, though, is it?
Unfortunately not. Any other business, I'll wait to the end and then re-ask.
Right, it's okay. I will just quickly move on. There are no... thank you, Matt.